Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this short video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous night of the local time. And first we're going to talk about Ocheretyne direction. We got a lot of very interesting details, and according to information we have, according to the most of the mappers, including pro-neutral, pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian, the Russians established complete control over the stronghold, over the town by the name of Ocheretyne. And if we summarize everything, this is approximately the territory of Russian control, at least by the evening of the previous day. Furthermore, the Russian sources reported that the Russians continue their offensive operation, and that as a result of a few waves of attacks, probably most likely those were something like reconnaissance in force or reconnaissance in combat, the Russians improved their positions further in direction of Arkhangelsk. So if we summarize everything on this direction, most likely the Russians have already established control over something like this. Obviously, this is a very, let's say, significant progress of the Russian forces, and we see that Ukrainians can lose another settlement on this side of the water barriers that we discussed during the previous few days. Furthermore, additional sources reported that the Russians entered the stronghold Arkhangelsk as well. So now we understand the main purpose, the main Russian goals, what they're trying to achieve on this direction. To understand this, first of all, we also need to talk about the further Russian progress in the town by the name of Novokalinovo. This is it. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers Deep State, the Russians established complete control over the Stepnovo Street, almost entire control. So this approximately the Russian territory controlled by the morning, by the beginning of the 26th of April of the local time. So if we summarize the Russian progress on the west and the Russian progress on the east, we can make a conclusion basically that the Russians are trying to, let's say, to encircle and to create a cauldron for the Ukrainian forces who are currently located in the area between Ocheretyne, Arkhangelsk, Novokalinovo and Keramic. There are lots of soldiers, a lot of Ukrainian forces in the area, and as you can see, according to directions of Russian attacks, we can make a conclusion that the Russians try to encircle them, or at least to force these Ukrainians to fall back. I'll remind you that this territory is under the responsibilities of the 23rd Mechanized Brigade, 115th Brigade, and small different, let's say, battalions and platoons of different forces on the direction. So during the next few days are going to be very interesting and very important. Most likely today, if we receive confirmation of Russian entering Arkhangelsk, most likely the Ukrainians will start withdrawing their positions from Keramic and Novokalinovo. Now let's move to the south, to the area to triangle between Ocheretyne and Semyon, Solovyove and Novobakhmutovka. As you can see, we have a lot of geolocations, a lot of icons. According to different mappers, the Russians continue improving their positions, continue maintaining their foothold, and by the beginning of the morning, let's say by the morning of the 26th of April 2024, the Russians established complete control over this territory. Lots of, let's say, talks, lots of rumors, lots of updates about Solovyove itself. The sources reported that the Russians, some sources, very reliable sources, reported that the Russians established complete control over the stronghold, over the village. Furthermore, we have a few videos from the area. For example, on this video, we can see how the Russian soldiers were raising the flag. Have already raised the flag in the, let's say, eastern part of the village. We see a Russian flag on the small building that was almost reduced to ruins. This is not obviously the evidence that tell us that show us the entire control over the village, but at least over the eastern part. Furthermore, we have another video from the western outskirts of the village. On this, for example, video, we can see the work of, let's say, Ukrainian Bradley. After very heavy clashes in the western part of Solovyove, the Ukrainians, more precisely the forces of 47th Mechanized Brigade, on two Bradleys, decided to abandon their positions in this part. But the thing is that the Ukrainian sources geolocated, more precisely not geolocated, but geolocated the date, let's say located the date of the video, and according to information we have, these, let's say, clashes took place on the 22nd of April. So currently we can't use these video as an evidence that Ukrainians abandoned Solovyove. Most likely after the Ukrainians landed infantry, brought additional reinforcement, and after the Bradleys were out of ammo, they just decided to fall back, to step back towards the town by the name of Sokol. So for now, I believe that maybe the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation will report about complete control over Solovyove today, but when talking, for example, this night, most likely the Russians were about to start or to finish declaring operation. Furthermore, according to different mappers, including pro-Ukrainian deep state, the Russians continue improving their positions to the south of Novobakhmutovka, and this is approximately the Russian control by the beginning of the 26th of April. Significant progress of the armed Russian forces. The Ukrainians obviously were completely defeated. They're falling back towards the Novopokrovska, Sokol, Novosylovka, Persh, and so on. The Ukrainians are about to abandon their positions between Semyonovka, Berdichi, and Novobakhmutovka as well. I'm talking about these fields. So most likely during the next, let's assume 72 hours, the Ukrainians will leave this area and the Russians will establish complete control over this territory just during the next 72 hours, obviously, maybe even earlier. And after that, the main clashes for the main, let's say, salient is going to start. I'm talking about the salient, about the pocket between Novopokrovska, Novosylovka, Persh, and Umanska. But when talking about these salient, let's add the salient on map for better understanding what we're going to talk right now. So this is the salient. The Russians will try to establish control over during the next 2 weeks or something like this. The thing is that it's already a critical situation for the Ukrainians on this direction, and the thing is that during the previous few days, the Russians, if you remember, have already destroyed the bridge that connected the northern part of Umansk and the southern part of Umansk. So basically the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to support their forces in this salient, let's say, using this road, because the bridge is no longer exist. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous night the Russians destroyed another bridge in the vicinity of the Karlovka water reservoir. So as a result of accurate artillery strike, the bridge was destroyed. It's not, of course, a very big problem for the Ukrainians, but of course this situation will slow down and reduce the logistic possibilities. And if the Russians have significant number of Lancet drones, or let's say Krasnopol's artillery shells on the direction, of course they can easily establish complete fire control over this road, and the Ukrainians will lose possibilities to send their forces also along this line. The only way how the Ukrainians can support their forces in this salient is the bridge between the northern and the southern part of Novosylovka, Persh. So this is currently is the only possible way for the Ukrainians to send forces in the salient and to support the more or less normal level of defense. And the question is whether the Russians are going to destroy this bridge or not. If you ask my opinion, it depends on the Russian goals, what exactly the Russians are planning to achieve and wants to achieve. If the Russians just want to capture as many as possible square kilometers of the territories, then of course during the next 48 hours they will destroy this bridge as well, and then the Ukrainians who are currently located in this salient will be completely cut off from the mainland, from support, and they will obviously either destroy it or surrender. But from the other side, we can make a conclusion that most likely the Russians currently are interested in destroying of Ukrainian manpower. So that's why they will keep this bridge, let's say, allowing the Ukrainians to send additional reinforcement and fresh forces to the salient, which will be destroyed in this area from day to day, from minute to minute, from hour to hour, by drones, by artillery, by cluster rounds, by aviation. So maybe so I assume that during the next 2 weeks, the Russians will use these two approaches. First, they will allow the Ukrainians to send as many as possible soldiers, and then they basically will destroy it. And after the Russians realize that the Ukrainians are no longer, let's say, wish or want to send additional forces, they will cut the bridge as well, and then they will capture entire this artillery pocket. Anyway, if we summarize everything, we understand that Ukrainians have no chances to hold this area, let's say, a very long time. Obviously, this is going to be another meat grinder, let's say, with the purpose just to win some time by the cost of the lives of the Ukrainian soldiers. So now let's move further to the south, in direction of Krasnohorivka. The clashes for this stronghold also continues, and according to information we have, the Russians are about to completely defeat the Ukrainians. According to information we have, this area is under responsibilities of 46 Air Mobile Brigade. There are a few, let's say, groups of this brigade in this area, and of course the forces of 59th Motorized Brigade. And the important update that was confirmed by different mappers, including Syriac map, including pro-Russian mappers, Lantoly-Radov, the Russians established complete control over the, let's say, small foothold between the industrial zone and between the high-rise block Krasnohorivka that located in the eastern part of the city. So we are talking about these areas. So let's add on map the, let's say, blocks that were cut off by the Russians. This is the first important defense belt, and this is the second important defense belt of the armed forces of Ukraine on the direction. And currently the Russians managed to dig in between these two fortifications areas. So of course, the Ukrainians still have possibilities to support their forces using probably this road or even through the park between the areas. But of course, the shoulder of support has been increased by these Russian attacks. And now, of course, the Russians will continue moving further to the north with the purpose to cut this area completely into two pieces. And the more progress the Russians are able to achieve, the more chances that Ukrainians will start abandoning their positions and basically running away for their lives from this area as well. So once again, currently we don't know for sure the exact situation in the town, but everything tells us that most likely the Russians will be able to establish complete control over the stronghold before the victory day. And this is of course going to be significant, let's say, achievement for the Russians. Now we are moving to Krynki direction. The Ukrainians continue their FPV droning of the area of possible, let's say, landing area. We got additional, let's say, geolocations from Nova Kakhovka, additional geolocations from Korsunka, Krynki. So most likely, and according to information we have from different mappers and from different military analysts, the Ukrainians are planning to start the second Krynki operation, second Krynki meat grinder, with the purpose to force the Russians to bring some reinforcement, some artillery system, aviation from Donetsk or, let's say, Avdiivka directions on this direction, which will reduce the pressure from the Russian, let's say, main direction of attack. Obviously, something like this is going to happen. When talking about Chasiv Yar, we haven't received almost anything during the previous night, just additional F-bombings of the Ukrainian positions in the eastern bloc, without any attempts from the Russian side to attack the area, to start the final assault. But so for now, we can't even tell exact date when the Russians are going to start doing this. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the Russians are not going to do this ever. They just try to keep as many as possible forces of Ukrainian army in this direction, and to reduce the number of forces, let's say, on the same Avdiivka or, let's say, Donetsk directions. We continue receiving updates that the Russians entered Razdolovka, but for now without any geolocations confirming this. As you can see, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians, or 48 hours, the Russians tried to conduct something interesting on Verkhnekamianskaya direction. Today we got the final geolocations confirming that the stronghold that located on the eastern outskirts of Verkhnekamiansk is under complete Ukraine control, because the Russians were bombing this area heavily with the cluster rounds. Significant number of strikes the Russians dealt, but we see that probably those were something like artillery preparation before final attack, and then the Russians start an offensive, but the Russian attack was repelled by a significant number of Ukrainian FPV drone strikes and FPV drone bombings. So for now, no, the Russians haven't managed to achieve any results. But from the other side, we see increased intense activity from the Russian side in the vicinity of Sporna. A lot of geolocations were received just during the previous months. Since the beginning of April, this area was under very heavy fire from the Russian side, which confirms that most likely in a week, or maybe in a two, maybe this weekend, the Russians will attack this area as well, with the purpose to collapse the Ukraine defense belt and to establish complete control over the territory, which will open the Russians the gates and the window of opportunities to move further to the western direction of Ivano-Darivka. South in Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything during the previous 24 hours. Nights, let's say, north in Kupiansk direction as well, we haven't received anything. Kyiv updates, we have very interesting information. If you remember that we talk a lot about the things that Ukrainians are no longer able to change their passports on the abroad, and today more and more, let's say, experts start talking that it's a very good idea, would be a very good idea if Russia give these Ukrainians possibilities to change some passports on the territory of Russia, or on the let's say, diplomatic services in the Europe, if it's possible. But from the other side, we receive updates that Poland has already started giving the Ukrainians some papers, permanent papers, that can allows them to stay on the territory of Poland, even if their passports already, let's say, ended or something like this. So as we understand, Europe is not interested in sending, let's say, Ukrainians back to Ukraine because they're specialists. First of all, they're young men who can work, who can bring, let's say, money, who can earn money on the territory of Europe. And of course, it's much more better, much more interesting for Europe than just to send these guys back to Ukraine for certain death. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds you, we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.